All right. So I had to stream. Like my brain is is running like crazy. So, um, like the thing that Impact React tried to solve is like kind of creating this fuse between reactive state management and React itself, but it tried to do it through context, right? Um, yeah, here it is. So Impact React tries to do this through a context provider. And it has some niceties to it related to observation and stuff. But also, it's still a context. So it's not ideal in terms of like component contracts with parent state and all of this stuff. Also, it was based on this like, oh, but we want to do side effects immediately kind of thing. Um, but what were what was a revelation in the last stream is like, wait a minute. Uh, when we think about like external state management, especially classes, and like doing just the state management, not thinking about components at all, we think about like initializing pieces of state, and during that initialization, just like in a constructor, you set up your side effect, right? And you run it immediately, like a subscription to some data or whatever. But when we flipped our perspective a little bit and said that, no, 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 wait a minute. So this is still going to be driven by React. So it's React that's going to set up these pieces of state still. And if you need to run a side effect, just create a subscribe method. And that's what's going to control the side effect. And then you don't have any like strict mode or concurrent mode or uh, those kinds of issues. And that's really interesting because now we can start to take more advantage of React as well. As we discussed previously, like if you're going to open like a specific to do, for example, you can subscribe to it. And then when the component unmounts, you unsubscribe to whatever data was related to that to do. But you can still cache the to do, right? Because you have it like, you can have it as high up in your component tree as you want without it affecting any performance. So that's like the promise here. It's like, sorry. So we're gonna drop this state UI derived from state thing. This is still true. So this is observation. Well, let's call it observation reconciliation. Observation. So you have immutable on one side, you have mutable on the other side, you have waterfall reconciliation on one side, you have observation reconciliation on the other side. And this is just, it doesn't get more performant than this. But you also have so when I say immutable and mutable, like I of course talk about the nature of the values or nature of the state, but also like the API. So making updates to immutable values in JavaScript is quite horrible. Like you have to spread a lot, you have to slice and dice, as I say. And you can use Immer and stuff like that, but that's also something I want to highlight here. Callback updates, callback changes, update function. And here you just JS API, JS mutation API. So the point is, like in this world, you use an update function whenever you want to change state. While here, you just use the JavaScript mutation API, which also is a big difference. Another big difference is you only have shallow state. So when you use state, that's shallow. Like you can't, how should I put this? So when you have a list of to-dos, of course you can have an array as your state, and then you have the actual to-do items as like objects in that array. But you can't, like, how should I put this? You can't like create anything around that to-do. It just has to be an object. Unlike a component scope where you can like set up other relevant states. Like you can't have like a closure around it. That's what I mean. Well, maybe you can. No, that's not what I'm trying to say. Oh, come on. I'm gonna change to Spotify. I'm sick and tired of Apple Music. Just because I have 2 devices and I can only play music on 1 device at a time. It's stupid. Well, it's fine, but it gives me errors all the time. Anyways, what I mean is like, so I have an example of so for example, I have groceries here, and when I have the groceries, I actually create a grocery around it, and it has its own function and everything. I guess the thing I'm trying to say is that like the level of nestedness affects your performance, your ability to but maybe that's a given. Like maybe we don't have to highlight that. The point is that you can nest as much as you want in the mutable reactive world, and it doesn't affect performance at all. But in React, the more you nest state, the worse the performance is, because to change one little thing, you have to like change everything up, right? Yeah. But that's really a given by yeah, okay, let's leave it at that. Other thoughts. And then it's using functions in your state. So with React, you can't use, you wouldn't do this, right? You wouldn't do add grocery and subscribe on in use state. You would do it separately from use state. And really the reason you do it is because of props. So when you have function counter should double, for example, and then you do counter, set counter. So you can do a use state here, count 0, and you can have increment, right? And then you can say set counter current. This is the callback thing I was talking about. So you can do this, right? But you're not supposed to do that, right? But why shouldn't you do that? Well, the problem is, how should we do this? Times, should double. This is the reason. So now, so this counter component might reconcile, right? There's a parent component that's flipping this should double flag. But now we're closing over the current state of should double until we actually do an increment. Then it updates, right? Because then we're setting a new... no, not even then. Sorry. Sorry. We're closing over it, so it never changes, right? As opposed to if we do this thing. now it's always up to date with the props. And I think this is the last thing that's bothering me, because if, yeah, okay. Observation reconciliation. So here you would use a React compiler, right? And here you would rather use a bubble plugin that just makes all components observers and memos all components. It's a different kind of optimization than what the React compiler does, but it's even faster or even more performant. Well, that's, yeah, well, it is, at least in certain conditions, it is. Like when you do these nested state changes, it's like it doesn't get any more performant than that. Well, what was I gonna say? Yeah, so if you do something like, okay, so I want to create like use counter, and I can do count, set count, use state 0. I want to return count, and I want to return increment. And then I can do like increment. It doesn't matter where you put it, but the point is you can do this. And this is beautiful, right? But now you're stuck in, and if you use the React compiler, this is going to cache itself. So if the count stays the same, both the count and the increment function and this object is going to be cached. It's awesome. But if I do use reactive counter, and then I do counter, use reactive count 0, for example, and then I return, yeah, like you see immediately it kind of breaks down, because first of all you have to return the full counter, but then you have to do like increment here. Like the point is, in this world you want the increment to be here. Like, and this is how we think about it in the reactive world, is that you put your functions with your state, right? It being a class, it being an object, it doesn't matter. You put the functionality with your state. But now you're fucked. If you have props, if you're using props here, you're fucked. Because this is gonna close over and never change reference, which is really the good thing, but also the bad thing related to props. So I just watched this presentation, but I can't remember his name now. He's the core maintainer of React Query, I think. It was a really, really good presentation on API design and being pragmatic and so on. And normally you do not use props inside these functions. You're passing them arguments, right? And then you do something with it. It's a very theoretical problem that I just highlighted. And if you're using props, you can say that you shouldn't consume those props in your reactive functions. You should pass them as an argument from your component. Or you can say props ref, use ref props. And then you can use props ref.current, right? Again, this is like, if this was a very common thing, I think it would be a problem. But I want to state that. And that is just being pragmatic, right? Because everything else makes a lot of sense. Okay, so that's one, where the hell did I put it? So that's one thing. And then I thought about this use reactive hook, because if you're gonna actually use React to drive the state forward, what you want to do is use a hook, of course. But there are a couple of things to consider. Sorry. Use reactive. So one thing is like it should feel like use state. So it should be able to take an object and optionally a callback. But if you only take an object, then you don't have a reference to because what I did now is that when you use reactive, I got rid of the read only. Rather now when you use reactive, it always becomes read only. So by the sheer fact of using reactive, that's what makes it read only. So now you can't do counter dot count plus plus. That will give an error. But then you have to do count, and this just works out of the box. It's not like any special thing that needs to be done here. But the whole point of this is managing complexity. So what you would rather do here is like, let's see. Yeah, sorry, I had that already. Create counter. Or like use counter, sorry. So in this function, use counter. Yeah, or I guess this is the thing I'm still on the fence about. Like how intuitive does it feel? So you want to do use reactive, and then you might want to use a callback, but then you actually have to use counter equals reactive. You have to do something like this. Reactive. And then you could like do counter, but then now you have to do like function increase here and like counter count plus plus. Like it gets, you see what I mean? I don't like this. But you can also do use reactive and then create counter, for example. So you do create counter and then you drop this and you do this instead. And then you're back to it. The thing is that you have to use this reactive thing, right? Because now you need to be able to point to the reactive reference. And I'm not saying this is bad. It's just, it's what you have to do. But it gives you a lot more flexibility, right? Because you can, here you can safely like set up variables. You can have multiple reactive if you want to do that. Maybe only some of it should be returned, right? Stuff like that. I did think about like, why not just use state, right? Use state. You can do that. And do like counter. But then it's weird, right? Because then you have this other set counter, doesn't make any sense. And also you would have to explicitly do the read-only thing, which you don't have to do now. I think this makes a lot of sense. And I like, why would you ever do, but this is the biggest problem, I think. Like, I don't see any reason to do this. Like, it's nice for show, but this isn't, Yeah, it's just storing it. It's just storing it on a ref, and then it returns it as read only. So initially it was like use React. It didn't really do anything. It just put it on a ref. So it was like, why even have it? But you have to do something in React to only like do one instance. But then when I implemented that, it can actually be the thing that makes it read only. Then it made more sense. Because if you want to do local state, you wouldn't use this, and that's also the challenge I have. Is like a mental challenge, I guess. Is that you're using this because you're going to share it. It makes absolutely no sense to use this as local component state. There's no benefit from that. Then you can use state. Like, it's not like a bad thing. Of course, you can do it. And maybe that's fine. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it is better than 20 use states. And maybe like you can still like use a single use state with an object, but it's the updating of it, right? The update callback. Yeah, okay. But then I would also argue it shouldn't be read only by default. So, or you could say if you use a callback, it becomes read only. And then if you use an object, that's interesting. That could be a thing. So if you use a callback, yeah, like if you use a callback, it becomes read only. It's very implicit though. So maybe it should actually be reactive read only, since you have to use the freaking primitive anyways. Yeah. Yup. Okay, so what if it represents? So this is kind of like the use React signals thing. But what about this argument now that now we're getting so close to React that you might expect that you can do things like use memo and shit. Like we're bringing the mutable paradigm very, very close to React itself. Yeah. Okay, so I kind of on its like looking at this, I like it because it's very consistent with use state. And doing the callback just means you want to compose like more complex state. Oh yeah, you mean the object thing? Yeah, I would never use this. I would always use this. But there's something about consistency. It's more of a marketing effort. uh, as I said, like there's no benefit to this. Oh, use reactive. Yeah, but you have to, like we can't just do this, right? Because it's gonna recreate the state every time. And what marketing isn't confusing? um but yeah, but this is the thing, right? If it makes sense to me to just do everything externally, because then you have a strong separation between the mutable world and the React world. But you started this, Adam. You wanted to start driving state, initialize state using React. Um, hmm. Yeah, but this is the thing I can't decide on. Like, do you force people to do state management outside of React and then you pass this root object? Like you can still do the cool things we did with the device and stuff. Or we have to or do we allow people to actually like use React to mount reactive state? And what's the difference between? That's also a thing. Like the device thing is such a excellent example of how to like take advantage of React. But then is that something you just do for devices? Or is that the mental model for this? Like just like the family scrum thing. Like the way this looks now is that I have a session and then I've used session. So use session, where is it? Yeah, sorry. So here I'm just using use state. But now when I use the session, I actually create the session. And then I subscribe to the session and then I return it. Like this has to be like use reactive, for example, if I'm not gonna use. So this is how I create the session, and then and then when we get into family scrum, I have the session and I'm creating the groceries. And it's the same thing here. Creating groceries, subscribing to them, returning them. But what I don't like is use reactive. The only thing it does is like just set up the ref for this. Feels weird. Yeah, so these live based on the component lifecycle. Yup. So everything here is like the family Scrum component would have like groceries, to-dos, all the state that I want to live through the session. I will define it up here. And then pass it down to the other components. Which makes a lot of sense to me. What's nice here is that I have like nested state. So I have grocery, which takes the data, and it has the ability to shop that thing. Then I have the groceries with the filter and everything. And it's all just here, which is nice. Yeah, so the argument here is really just like I have to make that decision. Like, is it explained as external state management or is it explained as reactive state management? So in the context of the React compiler, yeah, exactly. Both ways are valid. I totally agree. So it's like if you think about React itself, like it has performance issues. So what do? Do you apply the React compiler and then run with React from there? Or do you go with a mutable reactive state management paradigm? Which means that you get this new hook called use reactive. And instead of having a bubble plugin for optimizing the React code, like the React compiler, you have a bubble plugin for making all components observers and memo. Like it's just a different kind of optimization that lends itself well to mutable nested state updates, right? But you implement it the same way. That's what I mean. Is like with the React compiler, you continue using useState with the update function and what you know from there, or you can choose to or you use the use reactive hook. Yeah, exactly. And it's like I think Adam put it well. It's like there are just two different approaches, and then the question is, which is the one that helps developers the most? Because there are certain patterns you can't take advantage. Like there's something about React having a lifecycle hook, which is pretty amazing, that you can take advantage of when you do external state management. You have to be fused like with React. So like the workflow would be you kind of have this component first perspective. You go in, you create a component. That component needs some state. But instead of using React compiler with traditional use state, you use the observing components plugin and you use reactive. And then you implement that and you share the state with some nested component. And then maybe that component needs to initialize some more state based on this parent state. You can still so it's a good question though. So in terms of testability, so where's the thing? Where's the thing? So in terms of testability, you can still export family scrum here. Sorry, not this one. Like you can still export grocery or groceries or any piece of state management and test that in isolation if you want to do that. Or you can test state management in the context of a component with use groceries. And for like effects, like environment effects, that's still coming from the outside. Yeah, I'm having such a hard time evaluating, like with Cerebral and Overmind, it's been so productive, but there has been this intense friction when state is actually like dynamic, and you have to orchestrate that in your state management. It's like we talked about. As long as your state tree is static, it's just freaking amazing. But when you start to have to orchestrate your state branches, right? So they're there and then they're not there, and you have to orchestrate that in your state management. So your UI, your components are still super dumb. So that's not the problem. But it's like in React, you just mount components, right? It's just part of components, and then you'll make your state come to life where it needs to come to life. That's what components do really, really well. But then if you do it externally, you have to like, okay, move from this state to this state. So now I have to remove that state branch and have to add this state branch. Yeah, but there are just two alternatives. Either you make your state management be in the driver's seat. I think that's the thing I was trying to express here. It's like I was stating that, like, who drives the state, right? So is state derived from UI? So that means like it's your components that's like moving things forward. It's the components that holds the state, and when the state changes, it mounts a nested component. That component might have some state. So the state is literally derived from, let's call it components, right? It's coming from the components. Or you can say, are the components coming from the state? Derived from state. This is, right? But it doesn't have to be like this. You can still have state derived from components in this world. And that's the, oh, look at that. And that is like the question. Yeah, that's the thing I can't like figure out. But that is the most concise way I've ever been able to express those two mental models. State derived from components or components derived from state. And the way these two things differ is like in components derived from state, you do all their state management and orchestration externally. You shove in a root object into your components and everything renders from that, just consuming your state management. Super dumb components. But in this world, you don't do everything externally and shove in a root object. You actually do exactly the same. Like you just have this new super performant hook called use reactive. But what I think is this is what developers are used to, right? Immutable waterfall reconciliation, update function, and state derived from components. Even though as powerful as it is to like flip that mindset, it's a big mindset shift, right? And you lose some opportunities, like we talked about. Like you have to, well, not lose opportunities, but there's some orchestration that React just does better than what you do manually in an external state store, which is like managing life cycle of subscriptions and when to fetch data. Yeah. So I like I want to say this. Oh, orange. So I want to say that the state is still derived from components. It's just that the state you create is much more performant. But it does also, yeah. I guess that's an issue regardless. Like, it does also bring mutability very close to the immutable world of React. And they can't overlap. Like, they actually literally live inside the same space, inside the same component scope, but they can't, like, interact with each other, kind of. And that doesn't matter if the mutable state is completely external or not. I'm very curious, Adam. Do you ever find yourself using, I guess you don't use memo, but you use effect? Have you ever been like hurt by trying to use effect with Mobex state and it doesn't work because it doesn't change references? What I want to say is like, if you were to do this, you would have to use, like it would actually replace use state. That's the thing. It would actually replace use state because to me it's like if you mix use state with use reactive, I don't know. Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Because the thing. Yeah. And it's not like you don't like you don't have to replace it, but it's like those two hooks are very different. They behave very differently. And you can't use state from use reactive with use effect, for example, or use memo, but like you won't really use memo anyways. But you shouldn't really use effect with state anyways. Like state management. Yeah. Yup. What I'm also wondering is the actual need for this callback. Like when we're saying that these aren't gonna have side effects, you could like, yeah. Okay, let's jump back to the. So even though increase counter.count plus plus. So this signature is like basically if you're gonna do local component state, like it's very interesting how I can't get around this. Like no one would question you putting your function with state when you do external state management. Like that's what everyone's doing. And that's what you do in programming. But inside the component, that's considered a bad thing because of the freaking props. Because of the closures. Yeah, it's kind of all over the place. So there is a repo called Bonsify, and then now we're working on a branch called with Mobex. So it's actually published on npm as Mobex Reactive, but yeah, it's like not a real thing. Just exploring. But I think that's like the biggest. Yeah. So okay. So to put it like this, I think the biggest, like talking about marketing. So if you were to use reactive, and like it's not about the object or the callback, it's really about, we encourage you to put functions in we encourage you to put your functions with your state, right? And the reason we do that is really because we need to have an object to make things observable. And it makes sense. Like in a mutable world, you put your functions or methods with your state. It's just, that's the paradigm. But we're closing over props, so you can't use props directly. So that's like, so there are caveats to this. So if we were to like publish this and say, yeah, this is an amazing way to do state management, super performant, blah, 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 but there are two caveats. One, we encourage you to put your functions with your state, but that means it's going to close over the props. So you can't use props. You have to pass props as arguments, or you would have to use that props reference. That's one thing. And what was the other thing? Yeah, you can't use it with use effect or like the state is mutable, so it doesn't change reference. So you can't use it with the effects. But like none of those things are practical problems, but they break your mental model of React. Or it creates friction with your mental model of React. And it gets back to this, like we're trying to fix React, kind of. While doing it externally it's a completely different mindset of building apps, right? Why does app development have to be based on components? Why can't app development be based on just working with state, and then you just derive that state into some components? But the engine is this thing outside of React. That's your app. It's kind of like both Cerebral and Overmind was based on this. That's why it always had this brain reference, because it is your app. It's the brain of your app. And then I even had this presentation with pulling Yoda's finger. Like, yeah. That's all about like the mental model for doing external state management. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's also a nice way to think about the trade-offs. It's like, yeah, that's a really good point. I like that. We should add that to the changes to, how should we put that? Yeah, whatever. I'm not sure how to express it. But it makes a lot of sense. Like whenever you want to change your UI or split up components and stuff, you have to change your state with it, or your state definition. But if you have an external thing, if you rearrange your state, it means you need to rearrange your components. Good point. Yeah. But okay, let's try to reset a little bit. So the whole thing that started this was because Adam had this device example. And that, to me, that was more about like data fetching, even though the data was already there. It was more about like making things come to life based on actual usage. Yeah, but that's the same thing. Well, what was different there from what we've been doing now? Yeah, everything's your fault. Yeah, like moving components around, um, moving components around freely, like that's when you don't have to not affecting state is super simple. It's the intertwinedness that makes it hard. Um, um, yeah, so who owns the UI? So like if you have proper external state management, and you just pass all the state management as a root object, the UI is just, it's almost like having one big ass computed function where you get your state as input. It is what React says it is. Like what's very interesting, okay, tiny rant. So React says it's state UI, right? This is the big promise of React. I think I rant about this in the impact presentation, but this isn't true, right? React isn't this. It's just a big tree of state UI, state UI, state UI, props UI, state UI, prop state UI, right? It isn't, you can't think of React as this big function of UI is a function of state. But if you have a proper external state store, this suddenly becomes true. But it's like state component tree, right? Or UI. You can think about it as this giant function where you shove in your state at the top and then you build out your UI. And then it's just super optimized because it's observable. It doesn't need to go through a waterfall of the whole freaking component tree every time, which is an amazing model. Yeah, sorry, like it's not, we're not saying it's more like a which one affects the other. It's not like so if you do external state management, your components are deriving from that external state management. But if you define your state inside your components, it's the components that decide when the state should like be created. So external state management decides when your components should be created, while with state in your components, the components decide when the state is created and like driven forward. But yeah, and then we have yeah, but then we have like all these other things like oh yeah. Context is not good for state management. That's for sure. What was I going to talk about? Yeah, but now you lose some things. So for example, if you're using React Router, you like that's why Cerebral had its own router. Overmind the same, like using state first routing. And it's just to make the components as dumb as possible. They're only about elements, and styling. And if there's some like actual transitions in the elements and animations and stuff, of course you can use like local component state for that. But yeah, you would do everything externally. That also makes it super easy to create alternative UIs as well. Like you can easily proof of concept something. You can easily put it in React Native. You can, like, there's so many benefits to it. But then it's like, what if people are, what if developers, so that's also a perspective. It's like, are you building a new app or do you want to make changes to an existing app? So maybe you have an app with React Router, you're using use query, for example, or React query. And then it's like, no, now we're going to do everything externally. Now you have to do your data management externally as well. Like it doesn't play well with existing tools. But if you have like a use reactive hook, then you can easily use it with existing solutions. Well, not easily. Like what if you have React query, for example, and then you use reactive and you point to some data, and that data is going to be revalidated. Yeah, that's also a thing. Like, no, I do. Components derived from state. Like if you're gonna, yeah, I think anything in between here, like variations of these things, like different combinations of these things, I think that just adds confusion. Like just even the update function, putting immer in there is gonna create confusion. Hi there. I'm here ruining my own brain. But yeah. Yeah, and this is exactly what the React compiler does. Well, not just that, but it's a side effect of the React compiler, is that it will actually do what you expect. So I like the React compiler is gonna shake things up a lot more than we think, because it's crazy what it does, like in a good sense. It just makes, like, the only reason use callback and use memo and these things were and memo component was introduced was because to give us the tools to optimize React. But now it's just poof, gone, and React will become so much more efficient. But maybe the React compiler is quite heavy. It reduces like how quickly or like it affects your developer experience. I'm not sure, but it's gonna be really, really good. And that's also why I really wanna really push over to a different perspective, which is this. Okay, you wanna do mutable state management. We're gonna do observation instead of reconciliation. So we're not gonna mix these two. Either you use the React compiler plugin and you embrace React, or you use the observable components plugin and you embrace like mutable observation, the JavaScript mutation API, and you don't think about React as even being your app. Like React now becomes this tiny component in your application, which is just like deriving the user interface for your application. And the application is your state management. And it's incredibly interesting. Like someone just comment, I have this presentation called UI as an implementation detail. I'm going to find it and put it on the comment. Oh, that took a long time. Hello. There you go. UI as an implementation detail. It's actually a pretty nice presentation. I felt good that day. Here it is. But here I show using Overmind how we actually build up an application not having any UI, just using the dev tools. It's kind of cool. It's really cool. Where were we? Yeah. Oh, no, we weren't there. Here we are. Yes, I like that statement. Exactly. React is about the JSX, right? Exactly like that. And you can still consume the full ecosystem of React, right? As opposed to what if you wanted to create something new, a new virtual DOM thing where everything was like tightly integrated with this mindset. Like you would have to throw away React and its ecosystem of components and stuff, and that doesn't make any sense. But it's just a mental model, right? It's your app is this other thing, and you treat React as just driving or deriving JSX from your app kind of thing. So I think that perspective is worth pushing. And this perspective is worth pushing, right? This is definitely a valid way to manage, like using React and managing performance in React, using the compiler and using good patterns and all of that stuff. That's worth pushing. Yeah. Let's see. It's definitely a younger me. It's 5 years ago. Yeah. I had a beer in me as well. Like I was really in the groove that day. It was a lot of fun doing that presentation. Like typically I get super nervous before presentations, but I had a period, well, I guess it was about 5 years ago, where I did a few of them, and I started to like do things like go on the stage before people got in, just stand on the stage and just look out into the empty room and kind of just be with the feeling of just being almost throwing up. And then it's always a little bit shaky in the beginning, but yeah, it's a lot of fun when you get into it. And it's all about like talking about something you're passionate about, right? And that's why I like doing these streams. Like it's so fun for me to like the last video I made on the refactoring the production component. I'm just like, I'm so used to talking about all this stuff and I'm so passionate about it. So when I sit down to actually record a video, it's like it's one take, just going through it. I just prepped like a little bit of code and it becomes like way more natural. So yeah. Anyways, that was off topic. But yeah, no, I want to make a decision. Doing anything in between here where these things starts like moving opposite to each other. Uh, um, that would be that's a bad thing. But talking about how to do this in a good way, talking about how to do this in a good way, that's worth doing, I think. So what does that mean? That means that we're not gonna have use reactive. Um, oh, hi. Jeg har det bra. Tusen takk. A beginner series for React Hook. Oh, yeah. I have never thought about. Well, I tried a couple of times. I've been approached a couple of times to create like educational content. But I'm 41 years old now, and I understand very, very well how I work. And I'm not a very organized person. I am like doing these streams, just going all over the place, philosophize. Is that even a word? Philosophizing, or like just moving around, flipping perspectives, exploring ideas, throwing them away, jumping on the next thing, just free roam completely all the time. That's the only thing I can do. I can't dedicate myself to like set up like schedules and okay, how many minutes and like organize that stuff. I would love to do it. That's the problem. Like I would really love to do it, but I'm just not that person. It's not a skill I have. And I know there's a shit ton of really good content out there. So yeah. So I guess yeah, I would suggest finding some really good like front end masters. Okay, if you want a really good source for learning code, I'm very proud to be like one of the first subscribers to Front End Masters several years ago. But I would go here to learn React and anything else really. Amazing JavaScript fundamental courses with Kyle Simpson, who's an amazing teacher. And then you can come on my stream to just jump around and hopefully pick up some points for inspiration. Yeah, like so like my biggest contribution to like companies is well, one thing is like having just a bunch of experience and solving problems with other people. That's one thing, but also dived so deep into like state management and built these complex clients that has been like favored as like good clients. They perform well and they give good experiences. Like not because of me personally, but being in teams that enables that. That's kind of like what I do most well. But I do have a lot of AI projects as well. But doing some, yeah, AI is a lot of fun. I did some streams when AI started taking off, trying to build like a coding agent, and I also have this presentation on like building intuition for LLMs. But it's moving so fast. It's moving so crazy fast, and to build actual things, like I had this Excalibur thing where I made a LLM actually like present things, alternate between like drawing and talking and drawing and talking to kind of see how you can make an LLM be more of an educator, like a teacher, because they don't just talk, right? They draw a little bit and then they explain, and then they draw a little bit and then they explain. I did demo it to some colleagues. I have a YouTube short on it. I can show it to you. Where is it? YouTube short. Where are it? Shorts? Here it is. I think you can.
Let's start by drawing the basic shape of the crocodile's body. This will help us establish the overall form and size. Next, we'll add the crocodile's head. This will give more definition to the front of the body. Now let's draw the tail to complete the body shape. This will balance the overall form. We'll add the legs to give the crocodile a more realistic appearance. Finally, let's add some details like eyes and teeth to make it look more like a crocodile.
Anyways, that's where it ended. Yeah, I don't have the persistence to actually make something valuable for people. But yeah, it's interesting. We're in this huge discussion now at Together, where I'm working on making the on improving the client. Like, it has a lot of challenges with state management and data fetching, just being a startup and being iterated on for like over 2 years, pivoting a few times. So I'm actually in a discussion now, like saying that we should really test the React compiler. It's in beta. Let's look at how we do state management. There's a lot of context-based state management. Let's get away from that. Let's like agree on patterns and then apply the React compiler, and we're most likely going to be perfectly happy about that. Because there's also some people want to, no, let's just do an external state store thing just to fix it. And I'm not like against that. I even built like a few solutions to jump out of React. But the thing is, this is a company that's going to grow a lot. There's going to be a big team. And I think it's more healthy for a company that grows this fast, hires a lot of people, to embrace like a single technology. As opposed to like, yeah, you should be careful about adding to your technology stack, because it's way more important that you put your efforts into how do we do React at company X, and be very diligent and conscious about how you do that, and everybody gets on board with that. Like, and when new people are hired, they're part of this. Okay, this is how we do React at company X. Because suddenly someone like throws in a Surstand store here and you don't really know why, and it has a different mental model, and maybe you haven't done that before, but you know React really well, and then there's some friction there, like, why have you done this? Like, we can just use React, and then there's a new version of React, and oh, now we can't use that external store because there's a new feature in React, or like, yeah. So I wouldn't like tell anyone to, like, if they're doing a lot of React, to like, no, you should move to do this instead for the app. It's more like for anyone doing like a new app, they know it's going to be like crazy complex. They can have a better experience doing this one. Where were we? Yes. And it's also what MobX was designed for, right? MobX was designed as an external state store. It wasn't designed to be integrated into React itself. So we're gonna do reactive count 0 increase plus plus. This is what it looks like. But this was incredibly helpful for me, for my brain. Export PNG. Okay. I'm gonna use this to explain why this Bonsify / MobX reactive project exists. And then we're gonna go at family Scrum once more, and we're gonna completely embrace that the components are just deriving from the state. And that doesn't mean like this device pattern thing. You can still do that, right? It depends on how you what you need to solve. But like doing this fusing of mutable reactive state with React itself, it's not a good idea. I don't think so. Yeah, cool. You should see the stream. Adam was my what do you call it? We were about to throw React out the window just because of like this performance and like why don't they use observable components and all of this stuff? And I was having a hard time dealing with some concurrent stuff, and I was just, yeah, I was in a bad place with React. And we tried to make Vue act like, how should I put this? So Vue has JSX, right? You can write function components, you can return JSX and all of that. But Vue has some very, very peculiar behavior. So we kind of try to make it possible to write Vue JSX and function components, and it felt like React, right? But that's actually not possible to do, because and one of the biggest problems was this concept they have, which blows my mind. I think it's the thing they had. I don't know if Evan, you ever got the question, but like, what do you regret implementing? And this concept of fall through props, it's just insane to me coming from React. And just generally, it smells so much like an early implementation where like Evan is an amazing experienced developer, but like all developers creating APIs, you learn that making things easy for people, it can really bite you in the butt. And that fall through props thing, that was to make things easy. And it just creates havoc, in my opinion. What was the thing? What was the behavior? It was something about, yeah, you have to explicit, fall through props is like any prop you define. So you're consuming a component in Vue, and any prop you pass to that component falls down to the immediate element that you return from the component. So you have to explicitly define, which of the props do you actually want to handle as props, and everything else is going to fall down to the returning element of the component, which is just unexplainable to me. Like in retro, like it's very easy to say that now, like especially now we have TypeScript and everything, and spreading. Like now you can so easily like if you get some props, you can grab the props and then you can spread the rest and spread them on the element. Oh, interesting. Yeah. But what I love about Vue, yeah, having the same Adam. But what I love about Vue is just the team and what they're working on with Vite and what's it called now? They're gonna build an actual end-to-end tool chain for JavaScript, which is gonna be amazing. Like you'll get insanely performant bundling, building, formatting, linting, and everything just in one tool. It's gonna be freaking awesome. Really looking forward to that. Anyways, I have to jump off. And then I'm gonna write some more stuff, and then we're gonna try again to refactor the app. And then what's nice about that is that the family Scrum app is gonna be it's gonna present not only like observable mutate state and like immutable waterfall reconciliation state. It's also going to show these two different mindsets of where React and state is deeply integrated with each other and where React is just a way to derive JSX from your actual like app. That's going to be super nice. And then people can make up their minds, like what makes most sense to them. Cool. Thanks for following along, and I'll talk to you probably tomorrow. Bye-bye.